Hello and welcome to another episode of I Mustache You Something. I'm here with the sometimes interesting, but not always, Alex Faheem. Alex, are you ready to do this?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. After an I guess and an I suppose and a ready as I'll ever be, we finally got a yes. So we have to record to stir up your irascible juices. That's good. So um, I'll introduce Alex first by saying that um, can I bring up pathos? Is that okay? Is that fair game?
Sure.
So we were supposed to do a podcast as a group, and it just ended up being too sort of complicated with like the different threads and the different recordings and the splicings and the different conversations and winding and so on. Um, and Alex is the final member of that uh, podcast dream team. You guys have already met Kufta and Angie Awad. Um, and I think Alex was the silent Bob of the group. And we would start, and he would say, "Hi, I'm Alex." And then Kofta and Angie and I would talk, and Alex would say, "Thanks for listening." And I'm hoping that it won't just be whatever extended period of time this recording goes of me just speaking into the abyss. So, Alex, do you intend to say something on this recording?
Well, I mean, you already introduced me, so hi, I'm Alex is kind of out, but there's still hope for the end.
So, it, when was the last time you remember having a conversation with someone where you actually spoke like complete sentences?
I mean, I don't necessarily speak in incomplete sentences. That's a good question.
Don't question the premise, just answer the question.
I'm not sure.
Like I spoke to Mary this morning. We had a conversation. She said sentences, I said sentences. I remember. So if you don't remember the last time you had a conversation, is this to you like water in an oasis amidst the desert where you're like finally a chance to have a conversation? Or is this nails on a chalkboard and you're like, please stop speaking to me and turn the recording off so I can go about my day?
I think it depends on what we talk about. If we focus on like trying to get words out of me, it's going to be pulling teeth. But if you have something you want to talk about,
I already feel that
I'm
way.
usually okay with it.
I I I,
Yeah. We're there.
I mean, how many podcast episodes did we record for Pathos?
3 or 4.
Oh, three or four. Is that cartoon too old for you?
Might
There,
be.
there's like I think was it Looney Tunes? I think it was Looney Tunes. It was something with like a vulture, and uh, he was trying to catch like a different bird or whatever, and the bird would trick him and like put like this array of tea and crumpets, and he'd offer them the tea, and he'd say, "Oh, how many lumps do you want?" And he'd say, "Oh, three or four." And then he'd hit him over the head and give him three or four lumps on his head. Um, so anytime I hear three or four, I think, "Oh, three or four." So, well, so here's the impasse, and I wore this jersey for a reason. So most people, I would wear this and get like a reaction out of them because they're either diehard Patriots fans that disavowed Brady and hate the jersey because I'm wearing it and it's, unpatriotic and it's anti-patriots, which it is. Or they are uh, Brady Patriots fans who are still rooting for the Patriots, but very confused because they're also rooting for Brady. And you remember this conversation with Mark Khalil last Sunday, where he's insistent that if the Patriots are playing the Bucks, it is congruent for him to want the Patriots to win, but also want Brady to do well, even though he's on the opposite team now, mind you. And I wear this in your presence, crickets, and you're unfathomable. Like there's no reaction. There's no like, okay, let's go. And that's not just true of this jersey. That's true of like literally almost anything I do. Like I can get under, I would say everyone's skin except yours. Like I can't think of anyone else who doesn't have like a string to pull. And then the other reason we're gonna get stuck here is because, you know, I'm not going to try to be interesting to you. I mean, this whole podcast, this whole video mustache series, people are asking like, "Oh, like why are you doing it?" Like, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? Whatever we want. It's like, well, are people going to listen to it? I don't care. And I'm, as you know, committed to, just whatever. We're going to talk about whatever we want. So I am neither trying to impress the listeners, nor am I trying to interest you in a conversation. And you're very content sitting here torturing me, torturing them, and you're not going to do what the other guests do, which is like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to talk about something. And then it just goes like natural conversation. So this might be the shortest installment of I Must Stash You Something, and the only one where I don't stash you anything. But I must ask you something. Is there something that you're waiting for me to bring up that you're saying, oh, that's interesting? Like, is this like a read your mind kind of thing?
No, not at all. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I don't really mind saying this. So I feel like for like a lot of conversations, they're like almost autopilot, right? Where it's just like two people are kind of saying words at each other, but it's not really a conversation because we're just like waiting for the other person to stop talking. And then we'll say something, and then they'll say something, but we don't really care what they're saying. We'll wait for them to stop, and then we'll keep talking. So I don't really like that in society. So my response has been like, okay, if I'm going to have a conversation, I'm going to actually try to hear what people are saying and then respond. I may have gone a little bit too far in that direction because now when it's like, hey, what do you want to talk about? Which is maybe too far in that direction. So I guess if I'm used to being responsive, coming up with things that I'm like, oh, this is what I want to talk about is a little weird for me.
And
yeah,
you
it's a lot
realize,
easier.
Go ahead.
Sorry?
No, please go ahead.
No. I was going to repeat, I think, what I was saying anyway.
Because you realize you sat there and like the most expressive thing you did was blink for like the first, I don't know, however many minutes. And I know you have a lot to say. Like people are thinking already. They're like, why did he get this kid? Like, what is happening? I'm like, no. He's a lot to say. You just gotta, give him a chance. And I remember that like early on, like you would start talking, I'd be like, is there like a machine recorder playing and he's just moving his mouth? Like, same kid. So you have a lot to say, and I'm hoping some of it comes out. Where do you think that comes from, that people just speak waiting for the other, or listen just kind of waiting for the other person to stop talking? Like, why?
I don't know exactly where it comes from. I think sometimes we don't really think about other people. We just get really excited about whatever we already have in our head. And
Hmm.
so a conversation potentially is like an outlet for it, but you can do it wrong a lot. Like sometimes you just haven't said, let me take it a step back. You're really excited about something you want to talk about, but like sometimes you sit on it for a while until you can tell someone, and then you'll tell them, but it's not really like user feedback. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna all of my thoughts.
I'll be honest with you. I kind of did that last night with Yusuf Hanna. By the way, the Canada guys make you guys look like you guys are all prim and proper. Like, I talked to you and Angie and Mark and Kofta, and then I talked to like Ray Malika and Yusuf Hanna from Canada, and like the contrast is stark. Like, or maybe it's just like, you know, the like the random sampling of two Canadians that I got. Gifted to me in the Boston area, but these guys like are from another planet, in terms of like how out there their thoughts are, which obviously like I enjoy. But yeah, I definitely like as you're saying that, it reminds me that I kind of did that with Yusuf Hanna, because like I recently had a conversation with someone else that, like, you know, this other person had said something about the slippery slope, and the slippery slope is like a automatic like um, invitation for me to be like, no. It's very similar to this is the way we've always done it. Like, those are things that I'm like, listen, let's have a dialogue about this thing. But you're right, like he was talking about things and I was thinking about slippery slope, and I kept bringing in the slippery slope thing, not because it was, I hope it was related to what he was talking about. And, you know, if I go back to the recording, it's like maybe he brought it up and I was like, yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about that, but I kept bringing it up, you're right, because of something I was holding on to. So is that bad, like universally?
No, of course not. I think getting excited or getting scared or just like really wanting to talk about something is totally normal. I think it's just detrimental when you make it habitual, where it's like I always have to be the one. Like it just when you stop listening to the other person on a regular basis, or just other people in general, where you're not really conversing, you're just going to day, and you're basically doing the thing on everyone.
So you're reminding me a little bit of Danny Ishak. So Danny and I talked about how careful he is, and this is not just true because he was on a podcast. This is true, like if he and I are talking one on one, just about, like, forget like something related to Canonia Ventures or, you know, service or something that, like, you know, he's making a very compelling point. Um, in those cases, like I'll be like, okay, yeah, you're right. That's you're right. That's what we should do. And he goes, no, I don't mean to like change your mind. I'm like, why not? Like, you made a really good point. We were going to do it this way. You're right. We should do it this other way. But even just talking on an interpersonal level, he's so careful with his words that he doesn't want to misrepresent himself. Um, but for him and Anthony Zaki also, who, you know, is very careful with his opinions, you know, I value their opinion. I wish they spoke up more, right? So I don't know if I'm just interacting with the wrong people, or if I'm selecting out the, you know, make that sound again. Yeah, right. Like the man people, like maybe like maybe they're out there and I just don't realize. But at least in my circle, I feel like there's people that I wish spoke up more. So how do you find that balance between versus I'm going to listen, I'm going to engage. I'm not just waiting for you to stop talking, but I'm also willing, as I discussed with Anthony and Danny, to throw it out there and be willing to be criticized and be willing to be corrected and be willing to be wrong and, what have you.
Uh, I'm not gonna say that I'm necessarily the balance because I don't think I am,
No,
but I think the way I think about it is so I don't like the bleh, and to avoid that, I generally will just keep to myself unless I think it's going to be useful for other people. Like if I think my opinion will help the conversation or be useful and it's like somewhat prompted, I'll give it. Um, Otherwise, it's like I think a conversation is mostly just like outlets for people, and so I'll just let it be an outlet and I'll listen and I'll respond, and I think that's generally good for people.
So let's come back to that outlet because I think engaging intellectually and engaging emotionally, interpersonally are first of all intertwined. It's not like either or, like, you kind of do both at the same time. But if you're going to isolate them and speak to the emotional connection, we'll get back to that in a second. But on a purely intellectual, rational, pool of meaning level, let's say you've had 100 potential conversations. Just to, because you're an engineer, so I want to quantify it just so we're wrapping our heads around something tangible here. So in these 100 potential conversations, what percent would you guess you didn't even engage at all, making it really not even a conversation, but a opportunity that sort of passed?
Oh, you're gonna get mad at me because I'm gonna question the premise again.
Good,
So
fine.
like, are these
This one I expected.
okay? Okay, so are you talking about like a one-on-one conversation, or are you talking like a group conversation?
Um,
Because I think it's really, really hard to not engage on an individual conversation, right? Like if I'm talking to you,
even you will engage. Like you're not just going to stand there like this while the person just finishes their word vomit, and then you just walk away. And
okay, all right. I'm gonna ask one more obnoxious question. So there's the number of people involved in the conversation, and then my other question is, what are you considering engagement? Because I think we might have had like a small miscommunication.
I like where you're going with this. Let's put a group aside for now because we can assume that in a group conversation they're gonna and you're just gonna be the right. So let's get to that in a minute. But like one on one, are so far are you facilitating for this person to continue their word vomit?
Yeah, pretty much. Because like it's like a human thing. Like I understand this is where they're coming from, and I understand this is what I need, and it's like a God provides thing. It's like okay, I'm here. Let's help them.
And do you know what happens when you do that with me?
Uh, like if I were to do that with you, or like based on previous experience that I've done that with you.
Yeah, there's times where you've pulled this like real life therapy move with me.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what happens? Because I know what you're talking about.
Okay. I maybe don't because I don't remember anything negative, and I feel like we're going towards something negative.
Well, negative, like it's not negative. It's me realizing I'm like, what? Like, no, I'm asking you. Like, don't ask me,
Uh-huh.
right? And I mean, you do it well. Like it's subtle. It's not like obvious, but I pick up on it. I'm like, are you just trying to get me to talk more? Because I'm not just trying to talk more. And I know you're doing it now on the podcast. Like this is the first one where I'm talking so much and you're actually like bothering me. Like it's driving me crazy. I'm like, get him to talk. You're talking too much. But again, you're just very good at this, right? And I know when it's happening. But I would say, in terms of that 100 conversations, out of those 100, how many of them are that where you're not really engaging, you're just mirroring, and you're just letting the person say what they have to say without really feeling like there's space for you to offer your perspective?
So I'm having a little bit of a tough time because something just clicked for me. So I think there's like two ways to go about like what I'm doing. And one of them is just like I don't want to talk to other people. So as a result, I like try to avoid talking by making them talk more. So I just want to clarify that's not really what I'm shooting for. It's not like an avoidance tactic. It's just like this is how I see what other people are doing, and this is how I respond. But it's not like as consciences of like, I'm going to try to avoid saying anything useful. I'm just going to have them talk until this is done and I can move on with my life. It's not that. It's just like, I understand. Yes, 100%. Because I've never sat there and thought, I'm going to go, until they stop talking. Right. It's usually just like, okay, like I'm in a conversation. We're making like small talk, for example. I'm not super interested in the small talk, but like, this person in front of me bonds this way. So I'm like, okay, I'll respond like a normal person generally. I'm having such a tough time putting into the words now. But I think my point is just like I'm not avoiding anything. It's just like I understand like this is what's useful for the person in front of me. So this is how I go about doing it.
Okay. Um, and if it's in a group?
Oh, in a group, like unless the conversation has been completely derailed and like we just need somebody to like make a couple connections so that people don't get upset, I'll usually keep to myself.
Okay. And in both of those cases, whether it's you're facilitating for this person to kind of, you know, share what they're, holding on to, right? That you have accurately or inaccurately, right? Like whether this is their reality or your perception of their reality, that they have things to word vomit. In either of those cases, if you thought about it, would you have actually something to say rather than something to, you know, underrail the conversation for a group or facilitate sharing for the individual? If you thought about it. Because I get what I kind of hear you saying, like, I don't get to that point where I've even considered that because that's not even like I'm not even considering that. I'm just thinking about them in the conversation, right? Like you're thinking about the group, how to keep the group on track, and you're thinking about the individual, how do I get this person to continue to share, right? Those are your priorities in a conversation.
It's well, I have like two thoughts now, so I'm gonna ask a question now. So in your head, like thinking about it leads to like a deeper engagement, right? Is that kind of what you're
No,
thinking?
no, no, no. Don't jump ahead. Don't jump ahead because like
Okay, fair
I,
enough.
I
But
I love how your mind works, that you're not going to stay in the current question that we're discussing. You're either saying, how did we get here? And you're either thinking about the interesting, workup to this question and may or may not question the premise, or you're thinking about, okay, like if I say X, Y, or Z, then what path does this lead us down on? And I don't want you to triangulate. I just want you to answer,
well,
right?
I'm trying to, but in my head, I like here's what I'm worried about. Like I may be doing I think you used the like if I were actually thinking about what the person were saying and then responding. So I don't know if I'm doing it or not, and it's a miscommunication. So I'm trying to understand like in when you ask like are you actually thinking about what the person's saying to engage? what does
No,
that
no,
mean?
no, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. Are you thinking about what you think, right? Because there's a difference between thinking about what they think, right, which is very empathetic and um, facilitates your facilitation, right? Where you're so locked into what the person is saying that you forget that you're in the conversation also. So it's the same with the
Oh, I
group,
got it. I
right?
got it.
Like you're standing outside the group again with this like, and then like you see them derailing and you're like, I think what so and so is saying is blah blah blah, and what so and so is saying is blah blah blah, and you know I think what it comes down to is blah blah blah, right? And again, those are very empathetic responses to relationship and conversation, but that's different from I'm formulating an opinion, right? And bringing my opinion to the conversation.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay, I got it. So I think I guess it's the same for groups as it is for as an individual. It's just like if I think it's going to be useful or helpful, or like they're going to get something out of it, then I'll probably share what I think about it. But I won't do it just for the sake of doing it.
How do you judge that, right? And again, let's come back to the 100 thing because I want to understand this on a you know semi pseudo scientific quantitative level, right? In those 100 conversations, again, group or individual, it doesn't matter. With the group, it's facilitating. With the individual, it's mirroring, right? How many of them would you say that you actually consider your position, your reflection, your opinion, like whatever you want to say, to be valuable enough to the group or the individual to speak up and say, well, this is what I think?
Just to reiterate, so it's how often I would like feel the need to share my opinion just off the bat, like without any prompting.
Uh, yeah, no, not if like I'm there and I string you up by your toenails and say, speak, because I know you have something to say. But like unprompted, like people are talking, individuals talking, and you're like, hey, I think this is a contribution worth saying, and it's not just me word vomiting.
Two
Two. I
in a
agree.
good week.
I agree. Two. I think it's 2%. I agree. I agree. And what percent of the time is there somebody like me around that like holds your feet to the fire and says, speak?
Uh, doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And the other 98% of the time, is there any other differentiator that breaks up that 98%?
I mean, sometimes people will ask, like, oh, what do you think about this? And then
Uh-huh.
I'll just be like, okay, this is what I think.
What percent of the time does that happen?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it because it happened to me like 2 days ago. So,
Okay.
but I don't know if I could give it a percentage. It doesn't happen very often.
So tack on another 8% just for good measure.
So we're at a grand total of 10.
I mean, it's 10% or less that you're contributing to the conversation. And again, not at all to discount your contribution and facilitation for the group or mirroring for the individual. Not at all. Like that's I wish more people did. I wish I did that better. Like 100%. But if what we're trying to do is not say that this is valuable and this is not, right? Like Anthony Zeki needs to speak up more. Like Danny Ishak needs to recognize he's got like a really thoughtful opinion that he doesn't need to be apologetic about. And if you really only have like less than 10% of a contribution to these, then good, just keep it there, right? Like nobody's telling you to take your 10% contribution and make it 70% word vomit, right? Now, that's not what we're saying, because that like 60 conversation gap is you just spout and drivel, right? But is it possible, is my question. Is it possible that that 10% or less had more of a potential value, right? And if we had to guess, and you really like dig deep and reflect and say, okay, out of 100 conversations, if I actually considered it and without prompting and without invitation and without like this extreme empathy where it's like it has to be valuable to the other person, is there a chance that sometimes what you would have said would have been valuable to the other person?
Of course, there's a chance.
So, what is more empathetic then? To speak up and to give them the chance to consider whether it's helpful or not, or to hold on to it unless you're sure that it will be?
In theory, I guess it would be to see what they want to do with it.
And that 2% that you speak up, let's say we're talking not about 100 conversations, we're talking about 1,000 conversations. So that puts us at 20 conversations where you feel like, no, I really should speak up. Like, out of those 20, how many of those are appreciated? Where people are like, oh, yeah, that's it.
I have no idea. Because in my head, I can't think of that many times I've had a conversation where somebody was like, "Oh wow, I'm very glad you said something." I feel like
Okay,
that's like kind of a weird thing to say in a conversation.
so you can't even think, wait, can you at least think of 20 conversations where you spoke up voluntarily? Or like, do we have to go back into like grade school to get
Yeah,
into
pretty much. Like I just 20 like just
Okay, so let's just stick with 10. Like the last 10 conversations that you had that you can reasonably consider that you spoke up. Do any of them stand out where like what you were expecting in terms of a response was appreciated?
yeah, okay, I'm gonna be a little annoying. But just do you mean appreciated in the sense like a visible appreciation, or you just like you kind of know like okay, that was helpful to the person, good enough?
Either way, whether overt or perceived.
Okay, because perceived that in my opinion, in my head at least, is like most of them.
Most of them.
Yeah,
All of them?
probably.
All of them.
I feel, that feels arrogant. I want to say yes, but it feels slightly arrogant.
I'm trying to expose the arrogance actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know if I could say 100%, but I feel like most of them.
Okay.
Um,
So if there's arrogance
mhm.
in perceiving that when you have adjudicated the worthiness of your opinion to be positive, right? When you have said, "Well, this is helpful. I should offer this. This is going to be really meaningful to this person," right?
There's
Then
so
there's
much more
also,
thought into it than like I actually put into it.
but there's this fundamental underlying um, uh, drive, right? Like there's like a little like computer processor in the back going speak, don't speak, speak, don't speak, speak, don't speak, 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 right? And for you, the worthiness of what is being said is an essential tenet of that. And if we can realize that, yeah, there's conversations where you spoke and it wasn't really as valuable as you thought it was going to be. There's also, because if you nailed it every time,
Oh, you're talking about like, but it's not like a self-worth thing. It's not like I'm looking at it like, okay, this is useful. This is because see, useful and worthy in my head are different, right? Like worthy seems like an outside metric of like, okay, this is good. I'm gonna give it to people kind of thing, where it's like the most I'll think about it is like, okay, this may or may not help this person. Here you go.
but if you're wrong,
Yeah,
right? If you're wrong about something being useful when it
sure.
actually wasn't,
Absolutely.
then what could you also be wrong about?
I'm not sure.
So if you nailed it every time, if you were 100% correct that every time you thought something was useful, um, and it was perfect, then okay, I guess you nailed it every time. And maybe you also have a good sense of when it's not useful, right? But if you get it wrong about being useful, you might also be getting it wrong about when it's not useful. So something that you have to say could be valuable to the other person. Why hold that back from this person?
Okay, I think I see what you're saying.
So someone that's listening to this that is wondering if they're a word vomit person probably isn't, right? And someone who's listening to this and saying, "Oh, I would never word vomit. I don't do that." Like, and the person sitting next to them, like, they're chewing their ear off now, going, "See, like you hear what they're talking about? They talk about those people that talk all the time, and I would never do that, right? Like, I never talk and I always listen, right? So the people that are as cautious as you are about their words, I think a lot of times are the most thoughtful and have the most to say. And we're missing out because we only hear from them 2 to 8% of the time. The 2% when they think it's worth speaking up, and the 8% where someone invites them, like, hey, what do you think? So I must ask you something. Do you think there's more of you out there?
Probably.
Do you want to hear more from those people?
I don't know how to answer that.
Let's say there's person A, person B. Person A is word vomit person.
Mhm.
Person B is blink, blink. And let's say both of them, same, you know, thoughtfulness, same, level of experience. It's not about like not knowing or not having something to say. Which one would you rather talk to?
Mm, what's I can't help it. Like what's the point of talking to them?
you were gonna actually the more annoying answer that I was expecting from you is the word vomit person because it's less effort for me.
I'm okay with the quiet person or the word vomit person because again it's responsive, right? So if someone doesn't really know how to talk, I'm pretty good at just being like I'm pretty good at prompting. So that works for the quiet one, or that works for the word vomit one. The word vomit one, yes, like you said, is less work, but I'm okay with either.
But do you have like a intrinsic expectation of conversation for it to be valuable and to add meaning to both of your lives where you feel edified by the conversation? Like, is there any kind of sense of an objective standard? Or is it just whatever happens, it's purely relational and experiential?
So you're talking about what I expect, right? Or like
Yeah, and,
what I
and
prefer.
as it relates to to the marriage and the interplay between the intellectual and the emotional.
So my preference usually is just like, okay, if I can learn something out of the conversation, awesome, right? And like you try to engage as best you can either way. But just that isn't most conversations. And I feel like maybe my fault is like sometimes I'm hoping for the intellectual one and it annoys people. So it's like, okay, just let people talk about what they want to talk about. And that's human and that's normal and that's not that weird. And I will be happier if I stop expecting things from people.
Hmm. Say that one more time.
Where should do you want me to start?
Go back like 15 words, replay back the tape.
I guess so. My fault is just like I think I prefer to learn something, or yeah, like if I can learn something new out of the conversation, I think that's awesome. But I also think like my fault is that, if I shoot for it, other people will find it annoying. And so as a result, to like taper my own expectations, I will just let them talk about whatever they want to talk about because I seem to be happier without the expectations.
And say it again one more time.
I'm not saying it a third time.
Can I reflect it back?
You can. I mean, I understand. Like I knew all of this going in, right? Like, is that we're not. It's okay.
What?
I know why I am the way I am. Like, I understand this is where it comes from, and it may be like an okay application, even if I'm a little weird myself.
Where did you see I was going? Because I think you're interpreting an interpretation that isn't there.
Okay. All right, I'm jumping the gun. That's fine. Do your thing.
Well, no. What did you think I thought?
I think I was worried you didn't like. I think I was worried that you thought I didn't already know that.
No, 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 no.
Okay, my bad.
No. No, this is 90% self-discovery for me, 10% self-discovery for the listeners, and 0% news to you. So I'm realizing about myself that I don't give the same space, and maybe I should, right? Like I have expectations, and you know this. I don't small talk. Like I don't like you will do it as a force of habit. You'll be like, "Hey, how are you?" I'm like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, yeah, okay, I'll cut right to the chase. And you'll give me a typewriter, which I'm very excited about. So this is a gift that Alex gave me. That's one of the best things that anyone's given me in a long time. And I'm actually going to post a video to the YouTube channel in honor of you and your typewriter. Remember I told you I was going to do something with it? So I think a normal person would, engage in the small talk and, oh, how are you? No, like, oh, okay. And then that's the social currency that we build up with people so that we can get typewriters and other things that we want from people, right? Um, I again, like maybe I need to do that better, but ain't nobody got time for that. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and do your small talk thing with really no end in sight. Like, you're either someone that, like yourself, I enjoy talking to, and this is great, like whether it's recorded or not, um, or it's I literally I can't wait for the conversation to be over. And that's a confession. And again, like that doesn't make me a good person. That makes me somebody that needs to be more like you. But again, if we're trying to find the middle, you have let go of this expectation that conversations can be interesting. I'm horrified. Like I'm like I find that tragic. Like is that okay? Is that okay? Like are you really okay with that, or is this just like a like a oppressive reality that you've you know made your peace with?
I mean, it could be both. I feel like if you actually make your peace with it, then you're okay with it.
And you're really at peace with it.
I just stop expecting it. And I don't know if that's good or bad because like expectations are always they can be awesome in the sense that like you'll do really wonderful things if you set expectations for your are you okay?
No, you like keep going. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell if it was like a sarcastic nod.
No. Stop it with the extreme empathy. Just
Okay,
speak.
okay, okay,
Like,
okay.
who cares what I think? I'm angry at you. I'm not angry at you. I'm upset. I like it. I don't like it. Who cares? You talk.
Okay. So expectations can be good because you can like setting them for yourself. I think a lot of the times is good just because it kind of helps direct yourself. Um, but sometimes having it for other people or stuff outside of yourself can be good or bad, right? So like if you set reasonable expectations and you meet them, you're very content with life, right? And then sometimes not having expectations because something is too variable is also good because then instead of being too stuck up on did this thing meet or not meet expectations, you can kind of just let it be and then work with it as it is. Um, so I don't know which one of those this is for the conversation piece, but I think I'm mostly okay with not having expectations for it. Because I think the end result is like, I don't know, most of who I am as a person is just like, I don't like one thing. So in spite of it, I'm going to do something else. So the conversation thing is an example of like, I really don't like how most conversations are structured because it's just, bleh. So a lot of the times, not always. Um, and so as a result, like sometimes I'll get those conversations I'm not necessarily looking for, but appreciate. And then I'm just like, okay, cool. Life is good. I got one of those conversations this month. I think in theory, you're going to bring it back to, if you did a little bit more prompting yourself, do you think you could increase that? Um,
Ratio.
yeah, exactly. Thanks. Uh, and I think in theory, yes, but I think I'm okay either way.
Am I correct in um, reflecting on myself and thinking that I should maybe be more empathetic and be more relational and be more willing to have what I would consider to be, I'm going to use the word useless conversation because it's useful on a social, emotional level and not necessarily like super engaging on a practical intellectual level, but like still like, there's a value in that as well.
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Tell me more.
I mean, I kind of had two thoughts while you were saying that. Like, I think in general, the initial detriment or like the initial problem is like being kind of dismissive of other people when they're talking, right? Like, that's why I am the way I am. Because I just like, I feel like if they're not listening, then why talk, right? Just, I have thoughts, and those are basically just me talking to myself. They don't need to come outside if it's not going to do anything for anybody. Um, assuming you have like another outlet or you have other outlets for like regular mental health and all that stuff. But for you, I think it's like, don't be dismissive. But you're also, I think, like, I think time is another factor, right? So, like, I don't know how many people come up to you and say very wild things, and you just have to deal with it, right? So that happens to me every once in a while, but not super super often. So I think being more empathetic is excellent, but it also comes with like, it has to have like a little bit of tact of like, okay, I have the time and the space and the mental well-being to engage well. Because the other end of the spectrum is like, yeah, 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 just whoever wants to talk to me, whatever, whenever, and then you kind of lose your mind because we all have kind of a battery, right? And so if the battery explodes, then you're worse off than you were.
And this is definitely true, like in the office. Like if I'm in clinic and I'm seeing, say like 30 patients over the course of a day,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's going to be, call it five, maybe 10 that are there exclusively just to unload, right? Yes, the premise is my shoulder hurts, but the fundamental underpinning of this shoulder pain, this physician-patient relationship, this life experience that they're conveying is I need to unload on somebody, right? And you've heard of Philip Mamalakis, right? So I mean, for uh, him to reveal that to me was like a paradigm shift where it's like, okay, like not every conversation is going to be um, substantive in the same way that you expect it to be, right? It's substantive in a way that is beneficial to them on a interpersonal level, right? Where entering into their suffering, accepting that tension, not necessarily doing anything about it, but just sort of just being there as they, talk about, this traumatic event or this pain experience. You may or may not be able to do something for them, but you can at least, you know, be with them as they suffer, even just for a few moments. And that for them becomes iconic. And for them, that becomes a transformational experience that they can take after having left there to say, okay, this person really cared. And we think as, surgeons, like, oh, but I didn't do anything. But no, like that listening, that engagement is doing something, right? So out of those 30 patients, if, one or two need surgery, five or six need injections, 20 need physical therapy, there's still going to be a handful that don't need anything like in terms of like a treatment. They just need something in terms of empathetic encounter, right? I don't, at least I don't think I do. Maybe I people say I've mellowed out over the years and maybe um, I'm more likely to do this like in sort of real life, like interpersonally, but I don't think so. I don't think that's translated. Like in real life, like if I'm like literally, actually, Joe Atiyah, Joe. Joe and I were I was trying to make plans with Joe, like, oh, let's get together on Friday, and he said, oh, I already told my neighbor to come over. Why don't you come? And I didn't respond for like 2 days. And it's not like me. Like I'm pretty like responsive when it comes to text messages. And he's like, what's the story? What happened? And I responded, I'm afraid I'm not gonna like your neighbor. Because if I sit there and this is like my outlet, this is my place to like, have intelligent conversation with Joe, and the neighbor wants to talk about, I don't know, sports or something like where I'm like, this is a waste of a night for me. I'm like, I'd rather just cut my losses with the half an hour drive each way, just get back in the car and go home.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, so I don't know. Like I'm pushing on you, but there's like an equal and opposite pressure back on me, right? I'm telling you, why don't you speak up? Why don't you claim for yourself conversations that are more meaningful to you, while at the same time, maybe I should be doing the opposite. Are you going to say anything?
That wasn't a question, it was a thought, right?
I know, but like, again, like normal conversation invites.
Do you want me to argue with you?
No, say yes, say no, say maybe, say I hear you. I don't know, say something.
Okay, in my head, nodding is the equivalent of I hear you and yes, but like a verbal yes. Yes, I heard you. That was an interesting thought.
Was there nothing in your head? There's nothing like in response to that? Like there's nothing where you're like, no, like maybe you should do this instead, or yes, if you are going to do that, then maybe you should consider taking a Xanax first. Like, is there anything?
The point is to find some sense of balance, right? So I'm not gonna pretend I know exactly where the middle point is and then advise you as a result of this is exactly what you should do, right? So then at this point it's still speculative, and you've speculated, and it's probably somewhere in between me and you.
Dude, there's in between me and you, it's like saying, oh yeah, where's the grocery store? I don't know, it's somewhere between Tokyo and Mumbai. Like, what?
I don't know what else to say. I'm very happy in Tokyo.
I'm questioning maybe Hong Kong would be nice for both of us. Or, you visit Mumbai every once in a while. And I'd love to go to Tokyo, actually. I'd love.
Me too, actually.
Yeah.
So, all right, I guess if you want to take it that direction, so for me, closer to the center would be prompting more conversations just from my own head. Like, okay, I've been thinking about whatever thing I think is interesting, and then possibly presenting it to people and being, hey, what do you think? That's me going closer towards maybe the center of our spectrum here. Yes? Okay, cool. And so for you, going closer to that center of the spectrum would be being a little bit more willing to engage in conversations that you don't. I mean, I'm going to use vague terms because that's just kind of how I talk, but conversations that you don't potentially think will be that engaging.
Okay.
Okay.
So, how do each of us seek out these opportunities and act on them?
Well, I guess my first step would be having to actually think about things. And then after thinking about things, just asking people what their thoughts are. Although,
and how many days a week will you commit to thinking, and how many conversations a week will you commit to sharing?
I'm not 100% sold I want to do this. Because I used to do this a bunch where like I would just come up with different things to ask people. And it wasn't like just impromptu asking people random stuff. There was a little bit of that, but it's like I'd think about it myself and then I'd be like, all right, here's some thoughts. And I'd ask. And then it would just be like, dude, why are you even thinking about that stuff? And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Awesome.
So it's like a learned helplessness kind of thing where it's like, there's no point.
Yeah, I guess.
I feel like a good buddy of mine, Avram. Have you met Avram? He's married to Murmur. He's like
I'm not sure.
So there's a bunch of people that grew up with Mary and Dina and Maggie that married and went to the West Coast. One of them is Marsha, married to Abuna Dan. One of them is Carol, married to Abuna Moses, and one of them is Murmur, who's married to Avram. And I feel like Avram fits into that category where he's like, I don't think he's given up on the thinking, but he's given up on having people to talk to about it. But he's like 20 years further along than you are. So at least he's identified there's a handful of people um, that are likely to be receptive to this. But I tell him this. I think he doesn't do himself justice in seeking out more people, and with these previously identified people, engaging with them on a regular enough basis, or at least it seems like to me, at least looking from the outside. Um, did you ever do the Enneagram?
Yeah.
Are you a 5?
No.
What are you?
2.
You're oh, a helper. That makes sense. Did you look at the 5, the thinker?
I read all of them, but it's been a few years.
Because Avram is a 5, which is the thinker. Um, so it's one of those, like, introspective, thoughtful, but like not necessarily going to engage and share. Um, but anyway, you're not willing to commit. If I were to try to find the middle, how how do I go about doing it? How do I go about seeking opportunities to small talk, I guess, or
I think the beautiful thing about it is you won't really need to seek opportunities. I think they'll come to you.
I'm hoping that they don't, to be honest.
Do they not, as your life is now, at all?
I don't like. I think maybe the step for me to take is to notice them,
Yeah.
right?
And then engage.
Because it's possible that they come to me and I'm like, so it's possible they're there and I just don't notice them. But I will think about this. I will be like, okay, what would Alex do? Right? Like, okay, forget what you think. You're not contributing to this conversation. They're not here to listen to you or to engage or to add to a pool of meaning or to do anything that you would consider to be a constructive conversation. They're here to do their word vomit thing. And your job for the next, give me a number of minutes that I need to endure this.
You're still looking for something quantitative, but I'm having a little bit of a problem with the premise.
Okay.
So I think both of us have a little bit of a habit of maybe not a great one of like going into the conversations thinking it's going to go one way, right? And you're usually when you have an opinion, it's like pretty well founded. So I believe that like if you're going into this conversation thinking you're probably not going to get anything out of it, there's a high likelihood that you're not. But I think might be more helpful for you, and this is also something I'm not doing, by the way, so I should add that, is to, when you're going into the conversation, even if you don't think you're going to get anything out of it, to make the most of it, right? Because I think part of what's engaging is like, if you sit there and think like, okay, it is my only job is to just absorb the vomit, you're going to hate yourself. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a lot harder, easier said than done, but sometimes it's about like making the most of whatever you're in, right? So sometimes like if it's like an emotional thing and the person just really needs to get something out, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna help them get it out. But in your case, I don't know who you deal with on a day-to-day basis or that regularly, but making the most of whatever small talk you're gonna have, right? Because I think this is something I'm not doing. I've given up, so it's not great advice, but you have the potential to learn something from whatever conversation you end up having. So it may not be completely useless. So going into it thinking it's going to be useless is actually making your job harder.
So suspend disbelief then.
Kind of.
Okay.
And then you won't be sitting there counting the minutes.
Which I'm prepared to do out of my love and respect for you.
Count the minutes?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what it came down to, it's like just eat this for 7 minutes. That's fine.
Yeah,
but you're saying it's the wrong attitude.
Yeah. Because actually engaging is just looking at the person and being like, this is a person and they are an entire universe all by themselves. And even if I'm not a huge fan of the universe, they probably have something to contribute.
I mean, the one downside to this is that, we have COVID now. Mm-hmm. So I normally would have had like more than ample opportunity to practice next Thursday on Thanksgiving. But now with COVID, like, it's going to take away a golden opportunity for this to happen.
There's also the day-to-day stuff where it's like sometimes like your kid, I don't know how exactly you handle your kids, but like maybe your kid is super excited about something goofy and you're like, okay, cool. But then instead of being like, okay, cool, you like try to sit there and hash it out with them. Maybe you already do that. I don't know. It's just an example. But I feel like there's so many easy ways to just the day-to-day stuff of just like actually listening to people.
So tell me more about that, because I think I do that, but there's no way that I do that as well as I could. Like, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Like Jacob will come and be like, look, this piece of lint. And I'm like, oh, cool, buddy. Like, tell me more about the lint. But I don't really mean it. Like, I don't want to hear about the lint. I don't know why he's talking to me about the lint. I recognize it's my responsibility as a parent to reflect and engage on this very important lint. But is there more to it?
No, I think because on what I mean, kids are tough because like if you put too much emphasis on whatever they're doing, we get a little full of ourselves. And if you don't pay any attention to it, then we also get a little full of ourselves. So there's like some healthy medium. So it sounds like you're kind of doing that. Like the lint should not be like an explosive, life altering lint. But if you're, addressing it and paying attention and like the kid feels like he cares about you, you care about him, even if you're maybe not that interested in the lint, then you've done your job.
Because like if there's more to it, I can do more, but I mean, there's only
it sounds like you're about right on
like
that one. It sounds like you're about
lint,
right.
I can talk. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Daddy, check out this Lego guy that I made. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, tell me. Oh, well, he's got a shield and this, and I'm like, oh, he's got a mustache. Is that Daddy? And they're like, no, he's a pirate. I'm like, Daddy could be a pirate. I'm like, no, he's not. No, it's not you. So that seems to be kind of the level of that engagement.
Yeah, Lego, the most I can think of is just go make the Lego people with them. I don't know how into it you are,
but so I grew up as an only child, and one of the reasons I wanted to make sure to have at least 3 kids is so that I wouldn't have to play Legos with them.
Okay, I don't know how I feel about that because I think Legos are cool, but I understand it in theory.
Oh, I love Legos. I love Legos, but I mean, we're gonna get into like some dark, like childhood, like substance here, but like I played Legos my entire life. That my mom actually kept my childhood Legos that my kids go play at her house. But what I really wanted was not Legos to play with, but someone to play anything with. Like if it was like Tiddlywinks, is that what it's called? Tiddlywinks, or marbles, or whatever stupid game with someone would have been better than Legos by myself. So it's not so much the Legos, it's that they get to interact with each other, and I don't feel like this weight of responsibility that I need to entertain them.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I agree completely. I mean, at this point, it's just like maybe less about like you entertaining them and more about you participating. But I think we're getting to semantics at this point.
Participating. I mean, yeah, and I think your point about the balance, where they know that there's an existence apart from me, that I want them to be independent, and there's an existence that I have apart from them, that like I'm not dependent on them to give me my identity and my sense of self-worth. So it's not like this pressure, like, oh, I need to do this so that my dad doesn't feel like a failure. Like, no, like just go do your thing. I'm gonna do my thing, and if you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, I think the take-home message from this conversation is that we're both very unbalanced in different ways, in sometimes opposite ways. And at least I appreciate the dialogue, and I appreciate that you overextended your ability to speak up. and in large part tortured me because I talked so much. Like if you look at the other, you know, conversations I had with people, they weren't pulling teeth like this. I wasn't talking nearly as much, um, but I think it was not completely detrimental to my well-being and the uh, hopefully not the listeners that are sick and tired of hearing me talk. So thank you. I'm afraid to ask, do you have any parting words? For the sake of my sanity, just say literally anything. Like just string together a couple of sentences that sounds like a coherent thought and we can just be done with this.
Thank you for listening.
No, come on. That can't please.
It has to.
I don't know whether to be angry or impressed. I'm definitely both. I'm fuming with anger and also very impressed.
It's not a good impressed.
No, no, I like to you know how hard it is to get under my skin.
I usually don't shoot for it, which is kind of scary.
You're an aficionado.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you, Alex, for ruining my life. Goodbye, listeners.